Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very special webinar. My name is Chris Beck. I'm the editor of Manufacturing Management magazine. I'm delighted to be joined today by a panel of experts, including our host for the day, Heap and Partners. Founded in 1866, Heap and Partners is a fluid control equipment manufacturer for the oil and gas, chemical and pharmaceutical industries worldwide. Last year, they invested £500,000 at their factory on the Wirral in a series of high-tech new machines and a portable automated robot. And it's hoped that this investment will allow the company for the first time to be able to manufacture products overnight, unmanned in a lights-out fashion. It comes as the firm embraces the fourth industrial revolution, which is our topic of discussion today. The fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4, if you'd rather, has been on the lips of manufacturers for many years. It builds on the three previous industrial revolutions with the advent of cyber physical systems, the Internet of Things, and cloud computing, and has helped create what's now being dubbed the smart factory, a workshop integrated with a flexible system which can self-optimize performance across a broader network, which can self-adapt and learn from new conditions in real or near real time, and can autonomously run entire production processes. Now, the benefits of fully embracing Industry 4 are numerous: increased higher quality output, reduced lead time, a higher skilled workforce, and more profitability, to name just a few. However, uptake in the UK has been notoriously slow, with the country lagging behind other industrial nations when it comes to, for example, the uptake of industrial robotics. The latest statistics from the International Federation of Robotics show that around 21,500 industrial robots are at work in British factories, which is a tenth of the number in Germany. Only 2,000 new robots were installed in the UK in 2019, compared to over 20,000 in Germany, 11,000 in Italy, and even 6,500 in France. And when compared to Asian nations and the USA, the disparity is even greater. Small and medium-sized manufacturers are particularly slow on the uptake. And I mentioned Heap and Partners' investment in automation, but they're very much an exception rather than the rule. They're one of just 4% of SME manufacturers to have invested in automation. If we can get it right, though, the benefits financially could be massive. The global economy could see a $1 trillion boost from increased levels of automation within manufacturing, with companies themselves seeing huge return on investment. Some recent research by supply chain specialist Balloon One has found that countries with a robot density of over 150 robots per 10,000 workers are on average experiencing as much as 50% higher productivity levels than those with a robot density of 149 or less. So now is clearly the time to act, but how can we all make the most of this $1 trillion opportunity? Well, to help discuss that, I'm delighted to welcome our panel for today. Joining us is David Millar, the Managing Director of Heap and Partners, along with Tomipekka Lehtonen, Executive Partner for Industry 4.0 at IBM, Jelena Milisavljevic-Syed from the School of Engineering at the University of Liverpool, Kevin Hollinrake MP, a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and Dr. Shaden Jaradat from the Faculty of Science and Engineering at the University of Manchester. And thanks to all of you for your time today. Before we start the discussion, just a quick note to everyone watching at home or at work, wherever you are. Please feel free to ask any questions during the webinar via the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to be picking a few questions to put to the experts at the end of the session. And if you could put your name and the company you work for, that'd be great. For now, though, I'll ask each of the panelists to share their thoughts. How can we fulfill the $1 trillion promise of the fourth industrial revolution? David, would you like to start?
Okay, well, I suppose three things from my point of view. First of all, we have to demonstrate that this is going to gain us a degree of competitive advantage. We lose out a lot of business personally as a company to countries who only thing they can offer is low paid wages. So I think a series of case studies demonstrating varying solutions in varying industries would be helpful to get the message across that actually this is something we can do. Secondly, I think in the Northwest, we're incredibly fortunate because we're treated as the guinea pigs by the government at the moment, and it's wonderful. We have a number of really excellent schemes currently running. There's Made Smarter, there's LCR 4.0. These sorts of things are trialing ways of getting the digital factory out to SMEs. They need to be rolled out across the country as soon as possible because they give fantastic support to us. We've used both of those and others, and it's really good. And then I suppose the third point and it's a little bit more contentious, but grants which encourage risk-taking, but they've got to expect failure. And I know that's not politically correct or politically very popular, but we know from our own experience in doing little projects that they don't all work. And that isn't necessarily a disaster. It's just part of the learning process. And so I think a grant system like that, preferably one with minimal amounts of forms, would be lovely. That would be very nice.
Sure. Tomipekka, I'll pass over to you now.
Yeah, thanks. And I will share other 3 points here now after David, and maybe a little bit different perspective. I think the first one is that as we now go beyond COVID someday, it means that there is even stronger polarization between the best performance and those ones who are fighting for survival. And this is of course largely driven by the approach and the scale, how seriously everyone is investing in the digitalization. So I think the manufacturing organizations need now to take very seriously and act now and drive their Industry 4.0 transformation as a major strategic change. And that needs to be sponsored by the top leaders of the organization, and there needs to be the serious investments of time and money and skills and whatever is needed there. Secondly, I think that although this Industry 4.0 is largely enabled by technologies and somehow measured also by the implementation of technologies such as robotics, IoT, AI, blockchain, and so on, we need to remember that this technology alone is not enough to make the change. So this is a transformation, and the people and the ecosystems are playing the major role. So and of course the change needs to be business driven. So having a clear view what to do, where the value is, and ensuring that you have always the most valuable players in the team, that will help you to realize the benefit. And then thirdly, I think what is a really differentiator here to make this happen is that do you have the capability to drive these new business capabilities in industrial scale, which means that when you create something, you build up a use case, you need to do it in a way that you can actually roll it out to many lines, many factories, and then multiply the benefits that you are getting out of it. And this means that in reality, you need to have the right mixture of discipline, governance, and agile working practices. And I think with this, I would claim that these times to just experiment with the technology, those should be over. So those who are the winning, they are really trusting the technology and doing the large scale implementations going forward.
Sure. Jelena, would you like to pick up on that?
Yeah. Hello. Yes. So I would like to jump in and say that what needs to happen is we need to create a joint effort between industry, academia, and government in order not only to create this digital strategy, but also to change the education sector. Because what we are looking 10, 20 years from now, we will have a lack of digitally savvy workforce. And this can only happen in collaboration. As I already said, also what needs to happen that the government needs to work with industry and academia in setting these new policies and strategies. What needs to happen is the culture needs to change, and just the ideology that once you graduate, you don't need to learn anything afterwards needs to change. So workers need to adapt to this idea that they need to learn throughout their life, that they need to reskill themselves constantly, and also the employment as we know of today, it will change. So throughout our work life, we are going to change many careers, and we are going to constantly reskill ourselves. So that is something that needs to change. Also, I would like to stress out that we're putting so much importance on technical skills, but we also need to look in non-technical skills, such as developing critical thinking. So that needs to happen. The last point is a little bit of educational sector. It is about cybersecurity. So pretty much we are expanding the network. Unfortunately, the infrastructure is old. It is based on the infrastructure we have from 90s, and that is a global problem, and it will hit us very hard very soon.
Thanks. Kevin, it looks like this is a good time to bring you in.
Yes, thanks. I was interested to hear those comments on what the government might do. I think Ronald Reagan's quote that the 9 most feared words in business are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." So I think we've just got to be careful, really, that the government doesn't get too involved in this stuff. I mean, as well as being an MP, I've been in business for over 30 years. Absolutely massive believer in the power of business to innovate, and I think there's some really compelling reasons why business is going to need to do that over the next few years. Necessity being the mother of invention. First and foremost, Brexit, of course. Numerous challenges coming from that, also numerous opportunities. And I'm somebody who didn't campaign to leave the European Union, but have never argued that we can't succeed outside it. So I think some real opportunities there, but also some compelling factors that we have to address. Obviously, it's going to be much more difficult to get low-skilled workforce. Our demographics are we're having fewer children, so that's going to be even bigger pressure. Massive pressure on the welfare state. The costs of pensions, social care and healthcare are going to balloon over the next few years. So our people that are working need to be far more productive. So, and also some of the challenges in terms of Brexit, in terms of the border issues we're seeing, which a lot of which can be solved by technology, or much of can be, but also domesticating supply chains. We're going to have to do that. So all those things create opportunities. The government's tackling this to some extent with things like T-levels, university technical colleges. I'd like to see more happening. We're seeing increasing the rise of these multi-academy trusts, of large academy chains that provide secondary schooling principally. But one innovation, I think Lord Baker proposed this, is each one that has more than 20 schools should have a university technical college. Because one of the barriers to getting people from the academic education into technical education are schools don't want it to happen because it affects their scores in all kinds of different ways, how many people go to university, which is ludicrous. We want more people to go on a technical route. T-level is great, but also technical colleges. But we've got to convince schools it's a good idea, as well as educate parents why it's a good idea, and the young people themselves. So I've got some great examples in my patch. I've got something called Derwent Training Associates, which is a brilliant technical college. Works very closely with some niche engineering that I've got in my patch, James Fisher Nuclear, Marshalls, for example, Rosty McKechnie. So the businesses are there, we just need them to invest. I do agree we need to create incentives for investment, as has been said before, R&D grants. Also, this can tie very well into the levelling up agenda. So if we create free ports, to me, super enterprise zones as well, where it creates incentives for businesses to invest, to relocate, to scale up, that's a real opportunity. It needs to be this combination between business and education, probably through the LEPs, local enterprise partnerships, degree apprenticeships, all those things. I mean, what an opportunity for young people. I nearly became a computer coder 30 years ago. It probably would have been a big mistake if I had. But I think the opportunity is now to enter this new field of engineering based upon high tech is a wonderful opportunity for young people, and the salaries will rise accordingly, I think.
Absolutely. And Shaden, finally, over to you.
Thanks. Well, actually, after what Jelena talked about, there's little that I can add, but I do want to emphasize the importance of boosting collaborations between industry and academia. I'm not going to spend too much time making the case for it, but I would just observe 2 or 3 things. So, for example, whilst things like the industrial strategy has been around for a couple of years, the commitment to increasing R&D and research budget in general has been there for a lot longer, almost a decade now. I think the target of 2.4% of GDP is quite enshrined now in the successive government's policies. And as it happens, our research agenda is heavily informed by industry. So we do have this vehicle that can tell us where we should be heading. The other observation is that universities have already broken down the barriers between silos in terms of interdisciplinarity. You know, and the idea that you can get astrophysicists applying their knowledge in data analytics and AI in, say, healthcare is something that can be translated to industry through collaborations with academia. But having said all that, the question is how. And of course, I think there is a bit for everyone to do. There are things that government can do in terms of increasing incentives for these collaborations, and maybe we can discuss some of those later on. There's stuff for industry to do, maybe reaching out more, and a lot for SMEs to learn from big companies. Big companies, you know the score, and they know how to collaborate with academia really efficiently. But we want more SMEs to join this kind of effort. And again, we can probably expand on this. And of course, there is a role for universities to try and follow. I'm not going to go into that in much detail, but hopefully in the discussion we can address some of these points. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Shaden. Thank you, everyone. Just picking up on something that Shaden said there, and David, I'm going to turn to you here. As I mentioned earlier, Heap and Partners is a kind of rarity in that it's one of just 4% of SMEs to have integrated automation into their business models. Obviously, there's the obvious cost implications, but what else could be stopping SMEs from embracing Industry 4? And what could we do to change this? David, if we come to you, but obviously anyone can jump in as and when.
Okay. I genuinely don't think it's the cost. I think it might be ignorance of what the costs are, but I find now that if you're a profitable company, then there is a lot of businesses and a lot of banks lining up to help you fund your expansion plans or whatever they are. I think the real problem is time. And I think typically SMEs, the MDs, don't give themselves time to think strategically and to plan and to look at their factory, step back from it. The problem with this sort of change is it can only be driven by the MD. One of the most important parts of my job at the moment is driving change in my business. My staff are very busy doing their real jobs. You know, they don't have enough time in the day as it is. So if I want to come in and say, right, we're going to change something, then they need a lot of, let's say, encouragement to do that, and that's hard. But once they see the benefits, then they tend to get really behind it. Secondly, I think the terminology doesn't help. I think it tends to make SMEs think that, you know, if you're talking about big data or something like that, they think of Facebook and they think of Jaguar Land Rover and very large companies. And they don't necessarily think that this could mean actually an SME producing a small component in a factory. So I think we need to demonstrate the cost savings because they can be significant, and the costs aren't nowadays quite as prohibitive as people might think. We've just invested a large sum in a 5-axis machine, which obviously I'm very keen to maximize the output from it. But to help us with that, I've spent £70,000 on our first robot. Now, like most companies, we depreciate machinery over 7 years. So that's £10,000 a year. That's costing my company. But that robot can work 24/7, feeding the 5-axis machine. I can't get a man to work for 10 grand. It wouldn't be legal for a start. But this does mean that I can move towards my goal of having a night shift without people on it, because I don't want to go to the headache of a night shift. And then finally, I'd say that SMEs need to look at their problems, try not to look at the whole digital factory, but break it down into little tiny projects if necessary, and make small changes. Because if you make a small change, what we've found is we've done a series of little projects, and they're beginning to come together. They're beginning to link together, and they're all starting to feed into each other. And I know eventually we'll probably end up at something which might look like a digital factory, but we haven't started at the beginning and gone, that is our plan. What we've done is fixed a series of little problems, and then we start to link them together to make it more of a total solution to the company. So I would say those are some of the problems. I mean, there are many problems to getting the SMEs to adopt.
Of course, yeah, and Tommy, I'm going to again bring you in here. An IBM report, just basically building on what David was saying there around kind of data and knowing what to do with it. IBM have found that under 1% of all the data generated in a factory is used, analysed, and acted upon, which is a problem affecting not just SMEs but some of the big companies that we've already talked about. What can be done to get companies to understand the value of data and know how to use it properly?
Yeah, I think one of the essential things, especially now on the SME discussion, is that how do you learn from your peers, right? So what I see happening in many countries is that when people are getting and companies are getting in these community type of things and best practice sharing, so that usually helps people to move on because they see that automating this part of the production or making some simple application is not that complicated, that it can bring benefit. But I think maybe step back, instead of how to use the data, I think quite often the biggest challenge is that how to make the data usable. So that's at least what I'm seeing at the market, that the capability to having the data available in a usable format is really the burning problem for many manufacturing companies. And of course, here some companies do the trick that they think that, okay, we just blindly put all the data into this huge data lake and then we figure out what to do. But of course, everybody who works with the manufacturing knows that, when you start to do things, you start to build up the use cases, you have time series data in some huge data lake. It's more like a useless in that point. And I think what David said, one of the things was really, really important, that of course you need to build up from the small pieces, but when you are doing it, you need to build it in a way that the pieces come together in the end. And one of the things that we are recommending our clients is that when you start to build up the business-driven use cases from data or automate your production or whatever you do, you need to spend a bit time in the beginning to figure out that what is my reference architecture and what is my data structure and how my data platform is going to look like and what is the governance around that. And if you use that, it doesn't take long. It's only week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks that you do the vision for that. Then you are much better positioned when you are doing your project. So it can be then very small project, or it can be CapEx project for building a new line or whatsoever. But everything that you do is then done so that you are building towards that vision and the pieces come together. And then, of course, how to do it, how to engage people. So what we have seen very useful is that we are utilizing agile type of ways of working. So we have a Garage method, which is combining agile and design thinking and these type of things, where we have people from different parts of the organization. Because when you do things, you probably need a production engineer, you need a supervisor, you need somebody from IT, somebody who can fix the networks and so on. So you need to get these people in the one room so that they can figure out what we should be doing. And of course, one other thing that David said, that it needs to be then driven by the managing director or whoever is in charge and showing that this is where we want to go.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's my insight to that topic.
No, very good. I think you talked a lot there about kind of understanding and getting everyone on board with it, and that's a problem that's facing industry in quite a way. And we've had a couple of questions in already based on comments around skills, which we'll touch on. Kevin and Shaden, and well, everyone really. Studies have found that secondary school children, the next generation of manufacturers, if you like, don't see the value in manufacturing. 40% think manufacturing is boring. 15% of 17 to 19-year-olds believe jobs in the sector are well paid. Only 15%. Another study found that 60% of 10 to 16-year-olds said they wouldn't consider a career in engineering or manufacturing. What can Whitehall do? And I guess Jelena and Shaden, what can academia do to get schools and colleges promoting the value of not just Industry 4 but manufacturing in general?
Who will go first? Okay, I can go first. Well, as I said, it's not only single effort from academia. It needs to come through from industry as well. Because when kids, I would say like that, come and start studying with us, the first thing they want to know is, are they going to work with some industrial partners? Everybody looking forward to that. And it's so difficult to reach out to them, or they're just not interested to working with people master level, undergraduate level. So that needs to change, and it will definitely help attract younger people. But what also needs to change from industry is minorities. They need to focus on minorities, the different groups from different backgrounds, different religions, and even LGBT community. Whole cultural change needs to happen, so they understand that manufacturing is not some dirty job from 19th century. It actually is quite cool nowadays. That is what needs to happen, and collaboration with academia. I think that that would attract younger generations.
For that, yeah. Kevin, Shaden, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, keen to go. I mean, I think at the heart of this, careers advice in this country is woeful, terrible. If we put people on this conveyor belt just through GCSEs, A-levels to some degree, which might not be that useful. We've got something called the Careers and Enterprise Company, which is probably the best kept secret in this country, which is supposed to be the local enterprise partnerships connecting business to education. And in my experience, businesses are crying out to be involved in that kind of that equation, that dynamic. They really want to be involved. They really want to be talking to young people at a young age about their career choices. And we need to make sure that that career enterprise company is really fit for purpose in explaining to young people at the right age what the different choices are. And we need head teachers to get into this as well. We don't want to disincentivize head teachers to think, no, we need them to go to Russell Group universities and the rest of it. We want them to look at other career choices. So I think that's at the heart of this. Business can definitely find the solution. I think the most effective thing about business, and I say I've been in business for 30 years, the way we become more competitive is to increase competition. More productive, more competition. That's what you need. So we fill the hopper at the top with lots and lots of businesses, and they're going to work out through the process of creative destruction the cheapest way to do something, the most cost effective, and that's got to include, of course, automating things. And then they start to ask the questions, and Tom said before, I think about peer learning, peer-to-peer learning, which is absolutely vital. So I think you can't ram this stuff around businesses' necks and say, you've got to do it this way. You've got to actually rely on the process of creative destruction, survival of the fittest. Lots of businesses, some of which are more ambitious than others, some of which are going to invest more than others. Give them incentives by all means, enterprise zones and capital allowances, and as David was saying, all that kind of stuff. But these people are out there. I've got some brilliant businesses in my constituency, and you wouldn't imagine it in rural North Yorkshire. Deep Sea Electronics and Humprenco, they've got these people who are really passionate about what they do. We don't need to actually teach them much. We just need to make sure that those people actually set up in business in the first place and then develop a competitive edge and then are supported through the education system that is not one-dimensional like it is today. Definitely moving in the right direction, but not quickly enough. We need to get more technical with our education much more quickly.
I need to jump in something that I forgot. Time is essential, and education needs to change. It needs to be shorter, because by the time these young people are educated, the skills they gain are outdated. Same goes for the employees who wants to re-skill themselves. These are long trainings, and we need to change that in education. So they have right skills at right time.
Can I chip in with a couple of observations as well? I think there is going back to the role of universities in this. I think there is something that a lot of people would consider to have been a taboo for a while, which is so-called low-value higher education. But actually, these are not my words. These were used in the Auger review, which was, I'm sure many in our audience are aware of it, but for those who are not, it's the government commissioned independent review on the state and proposed future of post-18 education in the UK. And it did call for both the universities and the government to bear down on low-value higher education. And I think there is a responsibility on universities as well as government, but universities first, to market their courses in a more transparent way. You know, if you we all know that an engineering degree costs more than many others, particularly in humanities areas. But we need to be transparent and open about the impact or the how this degree will progress in terms of your career prospects. And it is not to say that one is better than the other. It's just about being open and transparent about that. The other point, if I may, is about perception. So if Industry 4 is about imagining, yourself designing a virtual factory floor and testing a product there, or a digital twin of the entire supply chain, this is going to be done largely by computer scientists, of course, in tandem with engineers. Then clearly the landscape is changing. So, yes, we know that engineering degrees are not as popular now amongst students as they have been, but computer science degrees are actually. And in fact, there is higher demand for those. So if the landscape is changing, why are we not changing our frame of reference? I'm not saying go to every dictionary out there and change the definition of engineering and merge it with computer science. But if we are going to recruit at schools, why aren't we saying that actually computer scientists are engineers in the Industry 4 sphere, in the Industry 4 arena? So we probably need to change our own perception of things in order for this to work.
Thank you for that, Shaden. That's I think you've hit on something there, because we've had a few questions in around skills. So thank you to everybody who's submitted a question so far. Please do continue to do so. We'll touch on a couple of those now. Thank you to Louise and Farouk, who've asked similar questions really around what SMEs and what companies in general, but specifically SMEs, can do to bring on board new skills and the technology needed. Louise has asked, how would you encourage and enable SMEs to gain both digital technology and new skills to support said new technology? David, I don't know if you want to pick up on this. Is it something that you've done yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we found that when it's an area that we've got no expertise in at all, for instance, we're just beginning to play with augmented reality, then we go to the university and we have them educate our people through the various schemes that are available. And that's we find our staff are really open to it because first of all, we've told them that there's a fear about, the robots are going to steal our jobs and all that nonsense. Because of that fear, we've guaranteed nobody will lose their job because of Industry 4.0. We might well end up taking more people on, but we've started by using the technology to get rid of the bits of their jobs they hate, the dull bits, the repetitive bits, those bits, so they don't sort of fear that. So when I then say, right, okay, now we've got something which is really interesting, like augmented reality, the uptake in the staff is really, really good. It really encourages them. And actually linking back to what was being said about education, if you're trying to encourage more people into manufacturing, which is absolutely the thing we should be doing, it's frankly the highest paid sector outside of the City of London, then that sort of thing, it's sexy now, even for my company, which sells bloody valves, which isn't sexy. So it makes things a little bit more interesting for people, and it's a good hook for people. And from a practical point of view, it's brilliant for helping us interact with our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if anybody else has got anything they'd like to add on that, but we've had a couple more questions around the skills agenda just while we're on it. And again, this is thank you to Farouk for sending this in, based on Jelena's comments, but ones that have been echoed by I think pretty much everybody on the panel, around providing opportunities for students, undergraduate, postgraduate, to develop non-technical career sustaining competencies that are appropriate for the digitally transforming workplace. What are some of the transformations that are contemplated and necessary to bring this sort of transformation about? Jelena, it was aimed at you, so I'll pick on you first to answer that.
I believe that actually, as I said, that question cannot be answered by people from only by people from academia, but also from company, because companies are the one that are putting focus on technological skills, not technology skills. And also what I'm hearing today pretty much are the problems of the past and the present. We're not talking about the emerging problems, the problems that will come. And we need to shift from technology, because technology is there. That is the fact. Technology surrounding Industry 4.0 is there. What is not there is this focus on humans, on workforce. The education is not there. The policies are not there, standards, and so on. So that needs, the focus should be on the future and the problems that are going in our direction. So that is what I would like to shift our focus more toward the future.
Kevin, how's government doing this? I know you've touched on some of the things you're doing already, but is there anything you'd like to add to Jelena's point?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree in terms of what David said earlier in terms of grants. I think you've got to make it worthwhile for companies to invest, try and mitigate some of the investment, and it's significant. And like lots of us in business, it's risk capital. You throw this money at a problem, you're not necessarily going to get that money back, and it's investment of time and money. So the more you can mitigate that with things like R&D grants, for example, or 100% capital allowances, I do think there's going to be a lot of that flying around. This thing about levelling up in the UK, this is not a quick fix 2 or 3 years. This is going to be decades of a job. The disparity between London, the southeast, and the northeast, for example, is the same disparity gap in terms of GDP per capita as we saw in East and West Germany before reunification. It is massive. That took 3 decades and $2 trillion to narrow that gap, and it's still not fully narrowed. So the government's going to have to throw a lot of money at it, not just on trains and railways and roads and broadband, but also in terms of things like incentives for people to invest. So I would hope a lot of that will be R&D grants and things like EIS schemes, SEIS, other forms of capital allowances, all these things you can see in enterprise zones that give businesses the incentive to establish, to scale up, and to invest in this kind of automation. So, and beyond all that, and great to hear the links between university and academia and businesses, but you've got to leave it then, I think, principally down to businesses, the ones that are ambitious, the ones that see the future, the ones that aren't afraid to invest, and make sure, and encourage this dynamic solution to our complex problems. I think you quoted those fascinating figures in terms of the number of robots in the UK versus Germany. Well, obviously, it's a massive manufacturing base in Germany. We're a service-based economy. We need to make that shift. Brexit will drive a lot of that thinking, because supply chains are going to be much more difficult. So a lot of that will be repatriated, and we should incentivize that too.
Can I have another paper, please?
Okay, thank you for your contribution. So lots of different ideas, but ultimately, I absolutely believe that business itself will drive the innovation behind this change.
Absolutely. It's just picking up on the point you made there, Kevin, and my earlier remarks about adoption of Industry 4 and the way that maybe we perceive it in the UK compared to other countries. We've had a really an interesting question in from Professor Menahem from Strathclyde University, and Tomipekka, I'm going to bring you in on this one. It's a long question, but I'll read it, and we can have a discussion around it. We're talking about Industry 4.0, which focuses predominantly on technology. In Japan, they talk about Society 5.0. The EU recently also announced a variant of the original Industry 4 idea that puts the human more at the centre of attention. Do you agree that classic Industry 4 needs to move closer to the human, and how? I also feel that there is still predominantly an Industry 3.0 mindset around in industry as well as academia, which still focuses on automation and robotics only. And then just to kind of add to that, a wider discussion that that Alex has sent in on the chat. Thank you for that. Just why is South Korea and all those other nations that I mentioned so far ahead of us in terms of automation and robotic adoption? Tommy, is there anything you'd like to say to that to kick us off?
Yeah, I think what Professor Menahem is saying, I fully agree. So the Industry 4.0 needs to be seen as a humans that are augmented by technology, right? So it's not like replacing the humans or automating the whole factory and making the lights out factory. It might be in some industries, but that's not typically where you get the the first and largest benefit. And I think it's also related to the question that Sani Shehu is saying about the potential or how easy it is for smaller companies go there, because they don't have the capital that larger companies have. But the larger companies, they are quite often very, very slow and rigid and all the processes, so they cannot really move. So if you keep this human-centric view and innovation and then boost that with the technology, then you can actually start to implement things quite quickly, because typically if you in example move to visual insights, quality inspection, you don't have to pay that much. It's a few thousands and you have it up and running. The technology is working like that. And then of course think about how you can get the talent into your company, and as it was already discussed, probably the manufacturing work, the engineering there is not like young talented people see like the greatest thing in the world. But what I have noticed is that things like sustainability, so what would be more sustainable than Industry 4.0, or what would be more sustainable on building products that are replacing some plastic or things like that. So that's also how to get the right mixture and right talent to the company.
Can I just make a point? Just in terms of this thing about small companies and big companies, and you can tell from my background, I'm a massive SME fanatic, really. But Apple was a small company once. Google was a small company once. Microsoft was a small company once. We just need to increase the number, the community of business, the numbers of businesses, and of course, within that community, there's going to be some people are highly ambitious and some people less so. But I don't see that the gulf between SMEs today and large companies today are any different than when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple. The same challenges. If somebody comes with new thinking, ambitious enough, people can do this. So I don't think SMEs are out of the picture here, not at all.
I just to sort of touch on that, and also the original question. We've found a real upswing in the interest in new people coming into the company on our environmental credentials and what we're doing. And they genuinely don't want to work for a company that's killing the planet. We started back in 2012 with our 3Ps program, People, Planet and Profit, which is our way of becoming carbon neutral, which we managed by 2017, and allowing our staff to give more back to the local community, because we're very conscious that our staff spend a lot of time at work, and at some point they will enjoy their job at Heap & Partners because they think we're a great company. Sometimes they'll think, I hate Heap & Partners, but I like my job. And sometimes they'll say, I hate Heap & Partners, I hate my job, but I've got to pay the mortgage, I may as well work here. And we have to still motivate them. So enabling them to have, our staff have 6 days paid volunteering time, so they can go and do something else. If they fundraise, we'll match it, anything like that. And I think that that side of this, the sort of what has historically been viewed as a very fluffy side of business and not very popular, is incredibly important now. If you're recruiting and you're busy destroying the planet, or you're doing some engineering process which is creating enormous volumes of plastic, well, you're not going to get the pick of the crop. So it pays for the companies to actually invest more in the human side of Industry 4.0. I think it's absolutely vital, and it's a very good point.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, sustainability is something that we as a publication discuss, monthly. The role that manufacturing has to play in that. Shaden, I'm going to bring you in, and we've had a question addressed to you here. Thank you, Shehu, for sending this in. It says, thank you, Shaden, for cross-examining the nexus of computer scientists as being engineers within Industry 4. Should engineers be more proactive in their computational approach, or should the computer scientists be fully inducted into Industry 4? Are we making computer scientists out of engineers, or engineers out of computer scientists? I think is the gist of that question there.
I hope I didn't just walk into some kind of fault line here. And whatever you say, you'll end up upsetting one camp or the other. But I mean, look, I don't think that. I think that many of them don't even see that barrier themselves. Be it we as outsiders might look at them and say, "Oh yeah, this is an engineer, this is a computer scientist, and this and that." But really, and if you look at our department of electrical and electronic engineering, for example, I mean, I think half the academics there come from a computer science background. And if you look at the universities sector in general, you will see this mushrooming of interdisciplinary institutes, almost to the extent that you start wondering, why do we still have departments? Why do we still have a department of computer science or physics? Or, of course, this one, I don't mean just shut down all these departments, but with all this interdisciplinarity growing, I think we need to adjust our definitions slightly. And I think it works, it bodes well with this modular approach that everyone wants to talk about. And making sure that, I always look at the American system, which is the extreme of how flexible you are in designing your own degree. And it has always been like that. And I wonder, do they ask themselves the same questions that we're asking here about the need to modularize our degrees? I don't know, but I suspect not as much as we do, because they've already figured that out. So I think we've got something to learn from other systems. And I think you mentioned something about, why aren't we as good as the Koreans? I think that, there is something missing in the UK on the TRL scale, from the low TRL to the high TRL. And I remember from my own research days, I worked in liquid crystals for a while, and I'm pretty sure that it was a UK physicist or chemist who invented the first liquid crystal. material or characterized it fully so that they identified it as usable. But then many years later, the Koreans took it and did all sorts of fantastic things with it. Similarly, the UK is home to the first purpose-built synchrotron, the X-ray machine, and therefore we invented the electron gun. But it was the Japanese who built the most powerful one ever. So something is missing on this scale, and I think this is where things like the UK catapults might come in. So maybe government can inject more funding into creating more of these catapults that draw upon the academic expertise in the UK and puts them right at the forefront of R&D for industry. I don't know, something like that.
No, absolutely. We've had a question in based around largely what Shaden was saying there. And picking up on something David said, David has highlighted the need for SMEs to realise a competitive advantage from Industry 4. Innovation, disruption and growth in the future are best realised from SMEs rooted in their local areas, which is something that Kevin was talking about earlier. What are the panel's thoughts on how we can do better at ensuring research, development and innovation from our universities is invested in manufacturing SMEs in the UK to create competitive advantage, capture value and fuel better economic prosperity? Thank you for that, Andrew.
Well, from my point of view, I think that's up to the SMEs. I think the universities are extremely keen to do this sort of work. Admittedly, sometimes it takes a little bit of time getting through to the right person, but we've found that some of these hit in the Northwest, the LCR 4.0, for instance, is very good at saying, what you need is somebody in this department, we will get in touch, and they make it easy for the SMEs. So the universities, please make it easy, but really, I think that should be driven from the SMEs. They should be saying, I've got a problem, help me solve it.
A more proactive approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just mention a couple of things on that as well? One thing that's gradually been rolled out to the UK is devolution, metro mayors, and I think they've got a big part to play in tying in local economies into universities, into academia. So there's definitely, that's part of their role, should be economic development. So Andy Streets of this world, Ben Hatchin up in my neck was Tees Valley, we're getting a York City region shortly. In York, we've got a couple of great universities and technical colleges and lots of good businesses. Drawing all those things together, economic development is their priority. So then you can link what the universities are doing, hopefully, with some of the key kind of economic drivers, economic sectors in those areas. The other thing I'd say that's critical to all this, somebody's talking about career before, is banking. In the UK, where our banking tends to be very short term, businesses don't trust their banks that much. I do a lot of work in Parliament on banking. If you think your bank's going to pull the plug at any point in time, you sell your business, the business doesn't develop, you don't invest in kind of automation and all the rest of it. Whereas places like Germany, Korea have a much more patient approach to long-term banking of businesses, and I think that's absolutely critical. Big fan of regional mutual banks, which are not for profit, much more patient capital, much more long-term, willing to invest alongside businesses over a much longer period, and I think that would help too.
I need to jump in, and I need to say that SMEs or big companies, they all need to develop new business models, and they need to account for uncertainty. And we have Brexit, where 71% of companies say they feel fear and they feel uncertain. And we don't still have data, what is the impact of COVID-19 and what will be the impact of future for them that will come in our way. So what companies need to do, they need to develop new business models. They need to account for these type of uncertainties. They need to remain robust in this kind of new normal environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got time for one more quick question, which is coming from Colin Finley from 7 Glocon Group, and he asks, it's a slightly different, slightly off topic to what we've just been talking about, but he asks, we know that our businesses have to become more global, and everything from sales and customer approaches to the sharing of technology and technical data will have to become more open. IP protection is core to any business developing base, but having to manufacture to suit local content rules. What is the panel's view on how global digitalization will affect IP protection, either positively or negatively? Tommy, I'll bring you in on that one, but anyone can obviously please jump in and answer that.
Yeah, of course, it's a topic that when you are building these global value chains and people are working there in a different roles, the different companies, you have to figure that out, and you need to have the right contracting in place. And then of course, there are things like blockchain which can help in some cases. And I think one thing that is related to this, and it's a really important for the whole industry 4.0, is this overall security stuff. Because when you are going to Industry 4.0, you are more or less exposing your OT to the internet, right? So it means that when you are starting to build up these things, you have to think about the security starting from the bottom of the stack, from the factory floor up to all the levels, and you need to embed that into all of the places.
Thank you, Tommy. Anybody else got anything they'd like to add to that point?
I suppose it's not a legal protection, but one of the advantages of Industry 4.0 is the way that you're moving towards flexible manufacturing, flexible production, rather than a standard unit coming off a big production line, thousands of them. And that ability to change quickly doesn't half wrong foot the competition. If they're trying to keep up with you and you're redeveloping, rechanging, improving the whole time, it makes it much harder for them to then just copy you because you're already ahead. So for me, that flexibility that Industry 4.0 should be giving you is a form of defense.
Absolutely, yeah. Unfortunately, we are rapidly running out of time. I noticed that in the chat, Dan Bradley has shared some information about LCR 4.0, which David and I think Kevin have mentioned during the discussion. So please, make sure you check that out. There's some other things in the chat to have a look at as well. Well, thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Thank you for the questions, for those who've answered them. I hope we've provided good answers. My thanks go to the panel: David, Jelena, Kevin, Tomipekka, and Shaden. And thank you to everyone at home for watching. Thank you all, and stay safe, and hopefully see you on a panel again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.